2023 was a really big year. This is a recap episode. As a movement, as a wave, there is just this energy and momentum that we haven't seen in the industry in a few years. Thousands of companies getting founded to go build something.
What was sort of your notable books of the year? The tech event or the theme of the year? A lot of people are going to pick what happened at the OpenAI, but I think this is the year of the rise of looking forward to 2024. What are you kind of like most looking forward to? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of the Aarthi and Sriram show. And not just an exciting episode, the last one of 2023. In case we manage to get this out on time. In case not, otherwise it'll be the first one in 2024. Either way, it's going to be awesome. And there's been some delays, but we have quite the special plan for you today. But before we get into that, I just want to say for everybody, if you're listening for the very first time or if you've been listening to us for the last few years, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And what would really help us is if you can give an offering to the algorithmic guards. The algorithmic guards are not pleased easily, but if you want to please them, depending on which platform you use, whether it's big tech, small tech, or medium tech, hit the like button on YouTube, hit subscribe, turn on the bell icon, get your phone buzzing when we drop a new episode. If it's Spotify, leave us a review, go follow us, send a note to Daniel Eck. If it's Apple, leave us a review. Just, you know what to do. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. But Aarthi, what do we have planned for today?
2023 was a really big year for us. So we wanted to do a recap. This is a recap episode. Without going into too much detail, we want to just talk through what our life has been, how the show has been for the last year, what we've learned, life hacks for 2024. Just everything that we've lived and learned through this year and what we're thinking of doing for 2024.
Yeah, we try and do this, I think, we've only done this show for last year. So, it's a tradition which is now second year running. We tried to do a recap last year, which went really well. It's all kind of just a great moment for us to reflect when everyone's looking back. So I think the first thing is the show, which I think is what we call everything we do here, everything that we jointly put out on social media, the reels, the YouTube shorts, all of it. It has just grown so much. I think when we were last year, we just started this show and we were about 20, 30 episodes in. But this year, and I think there are a few ways to quantify it. As sort of people look at numbers all day, our numbers have more than doubled in so many ways. I think you were pointing out to me the Spotify rap numbers, which are totally blowing our minds.
Spotify rap post was very interesting to me. So, first of all, numbers nerds, right? Like this is kind of what we'd love to do. From every aspect of the episodes of the show, we've grown a lot. Most of our sticky listeners, like the listeners who come in every single week, have joined us for the first time this year. I'm talking like 70-75% of the audience. So thank you. You found something, you found our show and you've stuck with it. That's really great. We've now consistently broken into the top podcast charts. And we have a few apps that use this to, we just basically have attribution tied to it and we just measure in a variety of ways. And so we're breaking into the top 100, in a few countries, top 10. That's very, very interesting. It's a very global show. What's been striking for me is initially we kind of thought, we are from India, so we're going to have this big Indian audience, and we live in the US, we're going to have a US audience, and that's pretty much it. But that's actually not true. We are incredibly geographically diverse, and a lot of those listeners also joined us this year. So from that standpoint, it was great. We've tried very hard to keep it to one episode a week this year, and just trying to get content out every week. And it's a lot. We're going to talk about this, but we basically moved cities, moved countries with our kids and everything, and just set up new lives here, and just put in a lot of effort. So it's really nice to see the payback for that. Just having this audience and having people actually listen to this and actually talk about it and share your Spotify unwind and tag us there and all of that. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I think the thing of the Spotify numbers, and as you can tell, Aarthi is the the very metrics-oriented person in the family. The number which really stood out to me is for a lot of people, and like over 1,000 people, we were their number one podcast that they listen to on Spotify. This blows my mind. And I think sometimes when you look at these numbers, especially in the world of tech, when you're used to these really large numbers, right? Like Facebook has a few billion users and whatnot, you kind of forget what 1,000 people looks like. So this means you could fill up a really large, like conference center, and it would be full of people for whom we are the top thing they listen on Spotify, which really kind of it makes me feel so happy. But also like feels like, okay, we know how to deliver, so if you're one of them, thank you. And also, I hope to kind of keep putting out content and episodes that have a lot of value to you.
Yeah, you're right. We are now creators. We never thought of ourselves that way, but this is now a thing, right? Like we are actually like doing this. There are people listening to it. Now it's up to us to actually make it valuable, make it useful. And so we can only be as useful as the topics that you would find interesting. So if there are things that you think we should cover, please tell us, talk to us, ping us. We are around everywhere. We try and reply to every email, and we are as responsible as we possibly can be. So just tell us what you find useful or what you'd like us to cover next year.
It's really just interesting you say you were creators. I think this year we've seen a lot of people who had who kind of who known for one thing and take up podcasting as a second thing. And, the world of tech is kind of known for this a little bit. But I think about sports. So, for example, this year was a year where New Heights show with the Kelsey brothers really broke out. And I'm curious, right? Do you feel like a creator? Do you feel like there is a space for people who have a full-time job in one profession? I'm not going to claim that, we're Jason and Travis Kelsey, but then can also make it work in another profession. So do you feel like a creator?
Yes and no. I feel like this is our creative output, right? In our lives and in what we do through personal life, professional life, and everything else, we have very little outputs of creativity, like places where we can kind of do our thing, create something, put it out to the world and get feedback. And this is it. So from that standpoint, from the purest definition of being a creator, I think we are that. Are we an influencer creator, on an IG or a YouTube creator, that kind of thing? I don't know. I don't know what that is as a norm. I don't know if, that's the world that we live in today or we will live in the future. But I do think of ourselves as creating this show and creating content around it.
I was watching one of the Kelsey Brothers episode recently, and one of the things that struck me was they talked about how sometimes the podcast is much harder than playing an actual football game, which involves a lot of people, doing really violent things to each other. And one of the most interesting things about this thing that we're doing is it's a combination of so many things. On one hand, you have to have a core that just really works, and a core that is people, that is maybe, that you and me in this case, it's the Kelsey brothers, that is, Paul George, it is Chris Williamson, whoever. And then you need to have a core message or theme that they focus on. But there is kind of a little bit of a marrying of the art of the conversation, like what Tim Ferriss would call verbal tennis, which I think is a fantastic phrase. I was talking to him about a fantastic conversation he had with a guest who was just really good. They say that guy is just very good at verbal tennis, right? And the back and forth, right? And there's kind of a little bit of an art, the intangible quality there. But then there is a little bit of the, the mechanics of, okay, so do you get famous guests? How do you sort of work on different distribution mediums? How do you take this, make it work for the algorithmic guard? So FYI, if you folks haven't liked and subscribed, do so now. How do you chop it up into YouTube and Reels? And how do you use Substack and email? So there's a little bit of marrying of those two. And for me, I think, so much of a venture capitalist life is you are not actually creating new things. You're often in the service of other people creating new things, and that's a job, and that's fantastic. Yeah. But this has been a fantastic outlet in terms of we have had to figure this out. And for those of you, Aarthi and I and our producer, the Sagnik, who's probably editing this afterwards, right? We have an innumerable conversation about like, what is the show about, right? Like, should we talk less? Or should we stay on topic? Should we do more solo episodes? Like, should we edit it? And they're all important, and I think figuring that out has been super rewarding. That's number one. The other really, really rewarding part is I was watching All In a couple of weeks ago, All In podcast, and there was this comment about Chamath, who's very successful, in sort of any measure. He was walking down the road in Italy or somewhere, and somebody comes up to him and he said, like, I'm a huge fan of the show. And Chamath is obviously just really happy with that. And, I just find like it is amazing when somebody out on the street, somewhere recognizes you. So, Aarthi knows the story. Like, we were traveling recently, and I was actually traveling separately from her, and I was going through airport security at SFO, and I was having kind of a shitty day. I was kind of grumpy about something. Doesn't really matter. And then at security, this gentleman, this Indian gentleman, I'm not going to name, but if you're watching this, you know who you are. Please do ping me. And, he stopped me and he was like, hey, I love your podcast, right? And he did listed all these episodes, right? Like that we're watching. And, I was kind of, just finished, I was keeping a tray and, I felt so really good, right? He felt like, oh, wow, right? Like, it just feels so good that, this person who's very accomplished in tech, and he had his kid with him. He was just like, he was like, oh, I love this episode with Indra Nui, and I did this thing with Khosla, blah blah. We had this great conversation, and and again, I think very not often do you get to have the kind of interaction, other things that we do in tech, where somebody's like, hey, I like this thing, and this influenced me, and so on. So those have been like two really rewarding things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, to what you said, this is like, it's a creative output for us. We put in a bunch of time into it. We try and work really hard to just set up, we have this like running doc. It's literally called running podcast topic doc. And we put in topics in there, we prep for it, we do a bunch of work there. But I will say, Sriram and I have complementary skill sets, and that really helps. Sriram is like the artist, he's the guy who like has the vision.
This is going to go viral, this segment right here.
Countless podcasts. He's always like, Kelsey Brothers, this thing, this other podcast, this one just launched, this one just did this. And he's always just like doing this, I guess it's like compete research.
Hey, it's an easy job. You gotta see what's out there. You gotta see what people are doing out there.
I'm no knocks there. Like, I appreciate it. And he does a lot of these research and all of that. My job is kind of more like a operations kind of person. Like, I will actually make sure that we're doing the thing, right? Like, every week we have to sit down, actually record it, because the artist sometimes will just not be inspired enough to actually sit down and record an episode.
That is so true.
So I have to sit down and make sure that I like get Sriram to sit down at his place and do this episode and get this delivered over to our other ops person, who's Sagnik, who actually takes it. And poor guy, he's always like, hey, it's Wednesday. Like, you guys have to like really send us in an episode. And he's like doing his part, right? So we have to all work in tandem to just make sure that at the end of the day, there is this thing.
Yeah, ships. I think there's a little bit of art to this, right? Like, especially, by the way, I think there's a big difference between guest episodes and the ones like this, which you call solo episodes, just Aarthi and me together. Because when you have a guest episode, you have a system because you book them. They're very important. You can have on the calendar. You don't want to waste their time. You want to make sure they have a great experience. So Aarthi and I have like a system and a rhythm, and you also know how you want to kind of take the conversation and you go through it. With Aarthi and me though, for most guests, sometimes it can be challenging. But for Aarthi and me though, I try and study writing a little bit. And sometimes there's a phenomenon where if sometimes people say like, you shouldn't actually talk about your work before you've done it. Because if you do so, in your brain, you've already done it. And it's sometimes hard to work up the motivation to actually do the thing. And what I would find is, we prepare for this podcast, I would watch like 5 different things. I would write up the Google Doc, and, I'll go watch like a Huberman or Lex or whoever. I'd be so prepared. But in my brain, I'm like, I already done the thing. And then like 6 hours later, Aarthi will be like, okay, yeah, let's get on a laptop. So like, I don't want to do it. I've already, in my head, I've already done it. And so you're going to go work. And so Aarthi is the one who sort of like, whips us into shape and say, you got to do the thing. So if you're the audience, you want to thank somebody for us getting out an episode most weeks, right? It is Aarthi. A couple of weeks that I missed it, I guarantee it is because like I was too lazy to get shit done. So, but it has been great. Okay, moving on. Aarthi, so what is some amazing or interesting moments from the year for you?
I just want to like come back to the episode itself for a bit. Like, favorite guests, favorite topics, stuff that I really liked. One, obviously we had a few episodes with Mark and Jason. Those have all kind of been like our best listened to, most feedback received, most comments received kind of episodes. To me personally, they're very inspiring. There's one about how to build a startup, like how to be a startup founder. And it touches on some very basic things like, what is an idea maze? We've covered that a couple of times.
Yeah.
How do you think about starting a company? How do you like actually, have that like leap of faith and just actually go do it? But also Mark touches on one of my favorite books. It's called The Courage to be Disliked.
Right.
And a few of my friends have all ended up reading the book after that episode, where Mark basically talks about how this book is one of his like most recommended books, and it talks about this culture, especially for us, like as Indians, we have this where it's like you fit into this mold of just put your head down, do the work, don't try and take crazy risks, that kind of thing. I do think that mentality is shifting a lot in India and with Indians. But at least when we were growing up, that was pretty much the norm. Like, just get a safe job, do the thing, kind of thing. And Mark talks about, how this book really is about this author who just walks through the courage to being disliked and walks through this whole thing. So that to me is like one of my favorite episodes. It's also got like, I think it is our most listened to episode on podcast, if you look at just the metrics as such. And for a very good reason. It's also most shared and everything. I love that from just like guest episode kind of thing. I also love specific episodes for me.
Hey, hold on. I just want to say the Mark episode the best. Mark by far is our most popular, fun guest, but he's by far the most painful guest to have on the show, right? Like, so behind the scenes, right? Like, and I hope this clip does go viral. You have no idea. Like, we need to book him for future episodes, but let's go for it, right? Because Mark is going to have so many complaints, right? Like the software doesn't work, right? Like he'll fits around with the background. There was an earlier episode where his background, looked like he was in a prison cell, and you can't get him to change anything. And then a couple of hours before the episode, he would be like, hey, what are we talking about? And then he'll give you like this couple of paragraphs and you're like, oh, okay. So what are we going to do here? And then the other tricky part is like, even with Mark, you kind of have to figure out how to, keep him out of trouble, because he's going to go on these amazingly long, very well thought out arguments, and you got to figure out, okay, right, like how do we kind of like, direct it? And I would say the amount of work that goes into the Mark episodes is a lot. But Mark, we love you. Come back on the show.
To be fair,
I am fair.
This artist in this room, namely you, does not, in your creative process, you will not tell anybody what you want to talk about. And so we all have to just ping you. Especially, I've seen these at like Mark and Steven episodes, Steven Sanofsky episodes, and both of them are there. They both will ping you, being like, what are we going to talk about? We are going live in like 2 hours or something. And you'll be like, well, we'll just like chat. We'll figure it out. I love you. We've been married for so long.
Oh, boy.
But
oh, boy.
And I know how that is. But now nobody else knows how to deal with it, right? Like they're all looking at it going, okay, what?
Yeah, I'm like, Mark, it's just, so to give you a peek behind the scenes, the way the Mark episodes usually work is, we just text him like maybe like a day before the episode. Be like, yo, Mark, you should come back on the show. And he'd be like, okay, when? And we usually do it late at night. And he'd say, okay, tomorrow night. And then we'd be like, sure, we're on. And then a couple hours of episode, he's like, what are we talking about? And the reason, by the way, he wants to know is because he wants to be very prepared. One of the things you may not see about Mark is he wants to be very, very prepared when he goes on any episode and, has his argument start out, etc. And he'll kind of give you but he's no idea what you want to talk to him. He'll be like, because I just be like, yeah, we're going to talk to you tomorrow, right? And me, I'm like Anthony Hopkins in this scenario. So Anthony Hopkins, very famously, when, he does a scene, there are many, many kinds of actors. And Anthony Hopkins, there are some who are like, I'm going to give you, I'm going to be rehearsed, in every single way possible. I know every little movement of my body, inflection of my voice. And so when the cameras hit roll, I'm going to, nail it, right? He is famous for wanting to never rehearse. And the reason, he says, is that he would love to kind of capture that energy where things just kind of, when you go live and it just really works. And he wants to kind of like just capture that ineffable quantity. And if you rehearse too many times, it's a little bit like a fruit which is the juice is kind of squeezed out of it. The spontaneity is lost. And I sort of lean more towards the Sir Anthony Hopkins school of thought, which is like, let's just do it live. Let's not rehearse this thing. Squeeze out. But this also goes for presentations. I think there is we're going like 5 tangents. This is like one of these biology episodes where kind of like 5 tangents below. I had to pop the stack.
While you're at it, why don't you diss like 5 more people?
I just praise Sir Anthony. But biology too, if you watch the episodes, it's like, you're like, you start off with like, hey, biology, how's your week been? And like, 5 minutes later, you're talking about how the FDA is the worst thing to mankind. You're like, how do we get here? Right? But it's happened. This is actually a true story. Go back, watch the episode. But I think so.
Okay. So what's your favorite episode? Let's like unwind this.
Okay. There's been so many. I think they're all special in a few ways. I think they're all special in different ways, right? I would say there are ones where we had never met the person. We were fans of their work, and they were just so nice and warm, and we just totally fanboyed out in a couple of ways. I think the 2 fanboy episodes I would say is, one is Andy Weir of The Martian.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't know the room, is one of the first episodes we did this year. So Andy, we just cold emailed him. We were huge fans. He was so gracious, came on, and he was a blast, right? Like, I was kind of a little bit sad that episode, in terms of metrics, didn't do as others. I think it's actually one of the most fun we had in an episode. So if folks don't get a chance, if you're a fan of sci-fi, do watch it, because he was such amazing. But I remember you loved that episode too.
I loved Andy Weir's episode. Obviously I love the books. Just big fan. I think we recorded it a few months after Project Hail Mary was written, got published. And, again, brilliant book. So we just got to like nerd out a lot about, I think my favorite part in that episode is how he basically reverse engineered or reverse deduced what the alien should be like the characteristics and the behaviors, like what would they look like, what would they breathe, why, like, and so on. And it was just brilliant, because they were like, well, this is, if you imagine this is a constellation that they are in, and this is the solar system they are in, and this has like these many moons, and probably there are not much gravity there, so they're going to have to like be like this, and and it just like works his way back. So as much as this is pure fiction, it is incredibly rooted in science, like deep, well thought out science. And I love that. Just really enjoyed the episode.
If you watch the episode, I think, like Aarti's saying, you'll actually see how he constructs the book, because it comes, he sort of reverse engineers the book from the science, which I've never seen done before. Okay, give me another favorite one. Anders Helsbrook.
Right. Yeah, Anders was great. Anders was so genuine, so charming. After all these years, it just felt like we were back at Microsoft, and just getting to like nerd out about programming languages. When we joined Microsoft many, many years ago, Sriram and I would like look up to a lot of these super smart people who like, wrote like the canonical emulation systems or the canonical garbage collector. They're like the people who built these like foundational computer sciencey things. And Anders is very much one of them, right? So it kind of teleported us back to that era of like just working with, talking to, meeting these like wonderful people who are just deep experts, like one of the few experts in the world on this one topic, and they just spent their entire lives dedicated to it and are just so genuine about it and willing to share and so kind about it. Oh yeah, I just love that.
I think the thing with the Anders episode is, I don't know if folks realize this, is before Aarti and I kind of have this entire career, the last 10 years with you, with your companies, and now Facebook and Rhythm, and me with social media, is where this previous life where we loved programming languages. And Anders was a god. And this was a little bit of us, going in and meeting one of your childhood heroes. And there's a little bit of, you watch the episode, and I think there's a YouTube comment which I think nailed it. There's like, Sriram is so giddy. Right, like, and because I was so happy, because we never met him when you were at Microsoft, right? And here we are in very different stages of a career, and I was a fan. When you meet like one of your idols, like a basketball player, like, and you want to show off that you remember all these details. So during the episode, you see me, to be honest, try and like be like, hey, I remember this programming language thing that you did, and blah blah. And Anders also was so generous, so appreciative. And I think, like you said, there is something so beautiful, almost romantic about this guy, about this idea that you spend your entire life dedicated to this one thing. And you don't know it's going to work. Like when he started off, he grows up in a small town. You know it's going to work, and it just worked. And and it's just one of the most beautiful episodes. Okay, I'm going to throw some couple of other episodes up to you, and see what you think. Nathan Mirwood.
Oh, wow. Okay. If you watch that episode, there is this whole story of me running into Nathan, right? Like that's kind of like how the whole thing starts. So I've actually met Nathan in person. Both Sriram and I are huge fans, not just for his like work in the world of tech, right? Like, obviously his contributions are like amazing, but he's one of those like modern age Renaissance men. This is like a bit like Anders, but like a little bit opposite of him. I'll tell you what I mean. This is a guy who picks up different topics, different entire industries, but becomes like a world expert in them, right? Like he's just so smart that he can pick completely tangential different areas and just become serious experts, whether it's photography, and he's published a bunch of books on it, knives. I'm not even making this up. He's just developed different knives.
Oh, yes.
Ways to, he's developed like a different kind of like pizza making oven, gone like super, super deep into these completely different topics. He's done like expeditions, like travels the world, just does a lot, like lives this like super larger than life kind of life as such. And just total true joy to just like listen to this guy just talk.
Yeah.
And we just learned a lot, had so much fun just listening to that episode.
I think a couple of things about the episode, I'll say, so Aarthi said, like one is like, again, we're huge fans of him growing up. Is he's so obviously smart, right? And you see this in another episode with Stephen Wolfram, which I'll come to in a second. But so it's so clear he's such a genius, Nathan is. Second part is, I think one of the things that give you real pleasure as a podcaster is sometimes when you get a question where the guest goes like, aha, right? And it's an aha in the moment, like it's a combination of, oh, I've never been asked this before, or you've done your real homework, or I am now, the meme where they kind of lean in, the video game guy kind of leans in, they're going to lean in, right? Like, so I have so many examples, like other podcasts talk about this a lot. Like, if you look at Tyler Cowen, a couple of years ago, his opening question to Carlo Knausgaard with the struggle, it just blows him away. Yeah, so I think I bring this up because with Nathan, I think I only got this a few times in our show, but I got probably the most unique version of that question where I asked him like how to make a good omelet. And if you the reason that it was so special, and if you watch it, he's so happy because he's actually in some esoteric interview, he actually talked about how hard it was, and we had dug it up, and he's so happy. Like it's one of these examples of it's a very great moment, I think, even if we sort of even if we did ourselves, because one, the guest is super thrilled. Second, it's super accessible for the audience, right? Because it's so simple. It's one of those things where you're like asking LeBron James like how to shoot a jump shot, something like, because you see a combination of real mastery and then something which is so mundane and every day and together. Yeah. But you can sort of feel it in the moment with Nathan, where he was like, aha, like, at least this question, these folks came prepared. Let's do one or two more. I want to ask you about Rob McElhenney.
Oh, wow. I forgot that we did Rob this year. For some reason, it feels much, much longer than, it's 2023. Okay, so we can say this now. We were very stressed out about Rob coming in. So no offense, but these Hollywood people are just not good at this stuff, right? Like they rarely show up on time. They are all over the place. And we were just really worried that it was going to be one of those. Mm-hmm. But
can I diss Hollywood people, which is and Aarthi is making a point that Rob is not one of them. But one thing about Hollywood people, they always dial in on their phones, right? Like, and I'm like,
Rob did do this on his phone.
But he was.
If you remember, So that is one diss on Rob. I will say that. I was like, oh, come on. You could have like just pulled up a laptop. I'm sure somebody has a laptop there.
But then he spent
did it
all
on
this
his phone.
But he spent all this time trying to frame the background, right? Like he was like, he looked around himself. He was like, he had this, you could sort of see all the Hollywood stuff kick in, and he was like, do I actually, what is the frame for the shot going to look like?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but he showed up, was fully prepared, had actually done some groundwork because we had like initially hosted him in the previous, like the audio only version. So he had kind of like followed through and like had like touched upon like what we covered then. Sriram, I think you're asking me about that episode because he was so nice to you. He said a bunch of things about like meeting you and was just very deeply impressed by you. So
editor, if you're watching this, make sure you include all these segments right here at this point. I'm going to pause so we get that more clean break. Let's keep going.
But to me, I think, obviously the friendship between him and Ryan Reynolds, I think that was great. Them co-owning this team. I think the Netflix documentary series had just come up. We had played that clip and that was great. And so it was a very lightweight, super fun episode, and it really delivered because that was kind of what we were going in. Sometimes it's like you want an episode to go some way, but it goes in a totally different way. And it's completely out of your control. You just have to like let the guests do their thing. But with Rob, we kind of thought this is how it was going to go, and it did.
Yes.
And it truly delivered.
Yes.
And there are sometimes when it truly delivers on what we expect it to be, you just feel good about it. Like I like predictable outcomes, and it was very predictable in a good way.
I'll give you a story about Rob, which is the episode's fantastic. By the way, one of my favorite things about the episode is we opened it with I think this was your idea, showing a clip of him and Ryan Reynolds celebrating with the Wrexham promotion win, and it was so great because it's at the right emotional tone of the bat. And Rob was fantastic. We talked about W. Like in the episode, he talks about W. But at the point I was going to make was, this is the second time we had Rob on the show. The previous incarnation of Rob on the show was in our Clubhouse days, which is pure audio.
Yeah.
And my memory from that episode with Clubhouse was we had never met Rob. He had never met us. Right? We were just like two random people. He was coming on. He was promoting Mythic Quest at the time. We hadn't known each other. We worked together a little bit, obviously through a bunch of stuff. And I remember thinking, like, this guy is such a consummate professional in the sense that he was so good at the verbal tennis, right? You throw a joke, he's going to respond to it, right? Like he's going to like direct the energy of it. It was such an easy conversation. And if you watch the episode, if you watch Rob's side of it, you see like how easy he makes it for us. So it's a brilliant episode. Okay, what are the other episodes that really stood out to you this year?
Let's see. I loved all of our just honorable mention, like what we call solo episodes, right? We basically took the feedback from a lot of you listening. Some of you just reached out and said, why don't you cover topic X? Like you would just like, not a guest, not anybody else, but just you guys sitting down and talking about a topic in depth. And so we kind of took that up as a challenge to ourselves and did that. And it worked out really well. One, we felt really good about it. We felt like, we were actually responding to like you being our customers. We were like actually like taking customer feedback and like doing something with it. That felt really good. But also these are one of our best performing episodes. So clearly it also worked out well from like a consumption, from like just people finding value in these episodes. It was most of these episodes were shared, and we know because Spotify will tell us these episodes were shared via direct link. So somebody who's listening basically takes a link and just shares it over to one of their friends and say, hey, you got to listen to this kind of thing. I love those. And we covered a whole range of topics, right? I think, Sriram, like one of your favorites, I'd like to think is the one on networking. Mm-hmm. And we covered that in like as great detail as we could. We covered the most recent one was on angel investing. How do you get into it? Why should you do it? Why should you not do it? That kind of thing. We picked a bunch of topics and I loved every one of those. So, I mean, I feel like for 2024, we're going to do a lot more of these. On just me and Sriram just talking and covering topics. I mean, I love guests, don't get me wrong, but like also when we have guests in the show, it's very hard for us to actually have a conversation and opine on things or share, our knowledge or what we've learned there. Because obviously we don't want to like take space away or take time away from the guests sitting here. These solo episodes just worked out great.
Yeah, I think it also teaches us a lot about, to use your phrase, our customers, which is all of you watching this, which is we get to do a little bit of customer discovery. And, I think, obviously, the people watching this are from all walks of life in many different ages. But I think the thing which is common among them is they want to just be better at their craft and what they do. Sometimes they have a little bit more of a, like a corporate, professional bias, which they want to get better at the sort of like, at their careers and, and being better at like their job. But there is definitely an element of like, I want to be better at what I do. And that has been the underlying thing. Like Aarthi and I spend a lot of time talking about like, what is the show about? And one of the things you always hit on is like our things, when we put out content that is about people being better at the things that they choose to do, that always does really well. So that's kind of like been an amazing theme. And if you're watching this, please do reach out to us, send us an email. Like we've done entire episodes because somebody sent us a thoughtful email about it, and we were like, oh, we should absolutely do this because Spencer made a great case for it. So please do, and that we expect to see a lot more. But okay, that's enough on the episodes. Now, 2023, has been an interesting year personally. We moved cities. So talk about that. So the London move, how has it been?
Yeah. And look, I mean, our story, if you're joining us, we're a more recent listener. We moved from India to Seattle in 2007. And then we were there in Seattle until 2011 or so. And then since then, 2011, we moved to San Francisco. We've always, wanted to live in San Francisco, wanted to be near startup founders, work with them, start companies ourselves. Like that was kind of the dream. So we spent a lot of time in San Francisco. We've moved houses, we've moved neighborhoods, we've done all of that, right? Especially like once we had kids, we moved to a bigger place from our apartment, all of that. So we've done moves, but all within the city itself. This is the first time, especially post kids, we basically packed our bags and just moved countries. And so now we live in London. We've lived here, this is our 5th month, I think, 4th month, something like that. So like we've actually moved. We now call this home. Our postcode, zip code is all different. And it's very different. It's a different life. I'm actually kind of proud of it. There was a time in our lives where we were like, well, we kind of say we want to like, we can always move, or we have the ability to move, we can do things. But I never thought we'd actually do it or would have an opportunity to go do it. Or if the opportunity does arise, we would actually like be willing to do it, because it is a lot of work. It is stressful. You kind of have to like, once you've like put your roots down, there's so much that you need to do to like just start over. And so I just didn't think we were actually going to do it and be serious about it. So I'm actually kind of happy that, 2023, we kind of took it upon ourselves to like actually make the move and move countries.
I think so much of it, look, obviously there was a big work reason to do this, in the sense that
why are we here, sir? I'm like, why?
I do try very much to not talk too much about the firm and Andreessen Horowitz here, but look, obviously we are big believers in the UK, and we're big believers in the ecosystem here, especially when it comes to Web3 and crypto. And we announced earlier this year we're going to set up an office, and we're going to do all these amazing things next year. You can read a lot more about it and a lot of other things we do. But there's always, that is kind of the driving factor, right? And so maybe something people don't know is that all this came about very quickly, where we made the announcement, and then Aarthi and I had to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to handle it personally to actually go make that happen? I would say that, a few things. One is like, and look, all of this kind of obviously goes to caveats that we have a lot of resources and help that maybe not everyone has. But one is like, kids are actually very much more malleable than you think, where our kids have sort of adapted very, very quickly, and they're very much younger, so they're kind of like both sub 5. So it's definitely a good age for them to go move, and that has been very good. And the second part is, for us also, it's kind of like hard for a couple of months, but now you kind of have your systems and people and rhythms and the gym that you go to and all of that, and you feel a lot more grounded. I don't think it was a good muscle to exercise. And and I was thinking about, for example, like NBA players, right? Like every couple of years, if you're not like a really top tier superstar, you may be traded, and before you know it, you're like, well, I'm getting a call and being traded to this team, and you have no time to prep, and you're going to show up practice, and you got to. And I was thinking about like them renting a house and all that, and I think it's kind of a good life skill, because it makes you, one, be very portable in your things, right? So for example, we left so much of our things behind, or or gave it away or whatever, because we're like, we don't need much, right? Like honestly, I spent a lot of my time just thinking about my laptop and computer setup more than anything else, and so did both of us. So you realize you don't really need much. The second part of it is that it also gives you a chance to clean house on your habits and routines, and a little bit like spring cleaning in a way. So when we moved here, it was a chance for us, because we had to put everything from scratch, right? We had to put together outside the kids' routines, like where we go to a gym. What is a nearby gym? Where do we want to like go do all the other things that we go to? What is a good restaurant we should order takeout from, or any of the little things that make up life? You kind of have to figure out from first principles, or at least things that you like. Or the nearby coffee shop that you want to go maybe do a meeting at, or go take your laptop to. And I think doing that from scratch, it kind of gives you a chance to basically redo a lot of your habits, which has been very useful for us.
Yeah, I agree with that. All of that. I think, look, I will say this. We always like to think we are portable. I think most people, most couples would like to think, oh, you can just do it. I think when push comes to shove, would you do it? If you had the opportunity to, would it be worth it? And how do you quantify whether it is like has been a good move, has been successful versus not? You kind of have to figure it out. For us, I will say this, like the good parts, we can showcase that we did it, especially this year. We both Sriram and I had like milestone birthdays, and it's kind of an important year for us.
Right.
And so for us, we kind of looked at it as like, F it, let's just go and just go figure it out. And I think that kind of paid off, because in our minds, it gave us like, there's so little that we really need as like an identity. And so we realized that, we can basically start over and build stuff. So
Yeah.
That was one.
Yeah, I think moment which I think about is when Brian Armstrong came on our show and he said, if I want to rebuild Coinbase, I can do it with my laptop because I've done it before. There's a little theme of like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think one of, we forgot to talk about this episode is by Paul Buchai. And, one of his, like my favorite blog post that he had written was, I am nothing. And he talks about this, right? Like you want to keep your identity surface area as small as possible and not get like so affiliated and rooted to, this is what we always did, this is what our customs are, this like, you can have your own like what is true to you, but really keep your identity surface area as like low as possible. And it felt like this was a good opportunity for us to go do that. I think for kids, we kind of were really worried about them, but like what you said, they just like picked it up and like went with it. We didn't even like bring, it's very expensive to like actually move all the things over because of customs and duties, and it takes months to ship everything over from US to UK. So we just packed a few suitcases and said that was it. Like we're not bringing everything. And that worked because the kids, we were like, oh, but what about this toy? And what about these things? And they completely forgot about it and it didn't matter at all. But in our heads, we were like, oh, we're being such shitty parents. Like this is a thing that we should have like brought with us and all of that. And none of that stuff mattered. I think, all the routines, everything from like, we are now living in a different house, different systems, different everything. I have no friends, no network. We don't know the neighbors. Like none of that. We kind of have to like start over. And so, the first month or so, it was all like school moms and dads. Like those were the people we would like always run into from like my kid's school kind of thing. But it was great because we just had to like start over and like, do the thing that we said we were good at. And we just like, went in. And for me, for example, I went and met a lot of founders here, just like did a lot of like coffee meetings, just got to know the scene as such. That was great. I get a lot of energy from just meeting founders and builders and just people tinkering. And that was great. And it was good to do that. I think on the con side, we have to talk about the things that were like hard or not great. Time zones, making it work is brutal. It's still brutal, right? Like this week, not much happening at work week. Like it's like this go dark period. And I'm realizing how in the last 4 or 5 months, we've had to like not be around for basic small things. If like, you want to hang out with friends or like do anything, you just can't because the evening time is really like peak meeting time. And like when
but just so folks understand, it's because, given though we are in the UK, a lot of things that we do, people we interact with, people work with, especially for you and for us, are people in Pacific time zone back on the West Coast or sometimes East Coast, but Pacific time zone. And hence, there's a lot of these late night, because late night, say 10 p.m., 11 p.m. London is about 1 p.m., 2 p.m. in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are days when Sriram and my meetings would end at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that. And it's rough, right? Like, and then, morning you kind of have to do like the school drop-offs and everything because you still want to like do all of that. And so we're still figuring out the time zone stuff and how to make it work. It's a bit of a challenge, but, we'll make it work. And we're just working through it. That was one. I don't know if you feel this, Sriram, but, there are points when I feel like we're a bit disconnected from, folks we know, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area scene, especially when I see like through the holiday season, like people meeting up, our friends sending us photos of like them meeting up, that kind of thing. I'm like, oh man, like I wish I was there. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no. I don't really feel that because I think obviously, look, there are people sort of we knew very well San Francisco, we don't get to see, but in sort of the more broad tech scene, quote unquote, I feel like the moment you open up X or the moment you open up, I don't know, Signal or Telegram or Discord, you're so plugged in to anything and everything, and you don't really feel away. But it is true that given that we lived in the Bay Area for so many years, so many of our people we kind of hung out with, just socially, and our parents of other kids or whatnot, we're all live in the Bay Area, so that you definitely feel more disconnected from them. And I sort of aware of the fact that'll probably change with time in London as we kind of get to know more people here. But that's definitely a fact.
And then just one last thing I want to leave with is we went to India last week. Holy shit, it was such a game changer to have like a 14-hour, 13-hour flight.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to like a whole day of traveling. Like for folks who've traveled from West Coast to anywhere in India with kids, you know what exactly I'm talking about. It is crazy. Like you kind of have to like plan, like in the olden days, you went for like a month-long journey in a ship or something. And, here, London is so in the center of the world that you could basically go anywhere in the world within like a reasonable amount of time. And that is a true game changer. Like, for us, we travel a lot. Sriram travels a lot. I travel a lot. And it's just great to just hop on a flight and get there and not feel like, oh my God, you spent an entire day just going from one place to the other.
I think it gives you an appreciation. I mean, in some ways, sometimes you have to experience it yourself to understand some part of history. And living here now, and obviously for folks in the UK, this may seem laughable. Obviously, we understood this, but it's like you realize why London is so amazing, or the UK is so amazing for international business trade for centuries, because you live in the perfect time zone. You live so centrally. There is almost nowhere in the world you can't just get on a flight for 10 hours from and be there. For example, if you're in the West Coast, like doing meetings with, say, Japan or Singapore is so brutal, but here it's much easier. And if you're on the East Coast, or if you are in sort of the other side, it becomes a lot easier. I sort of understand now why like this place has always been such a hub for, especially for finance and trade, where the time zones really matter so much. And you get the feeling of you are in an international hub. And I'll have a lot more to say next year about why I really think people should think about moving here and building businesses here. But living here, I now totally get it in a way which I only understood intellectually before.
Okay. Hey, one final thing. Big bonus for me is to see Sriram in suits.
Oh, yes.
Sriram has done a policy meeting, so now he's wearing suits. And my whole life, I never got to do that, because suits was always a thing that you would like have one off for like a friend's wedding or something, that you would just have to like bring out, dry clean, put it on, and then it goes away into storage for, years. And now you wear suits. And then it's kind of a nice surprise.
Oh my God. Yes, I do. I have gone from one suit to many suits. And I think obviously a lot of it's because I spend a lot of time talking to people. For example, like last week, you folks might have seen on Twitter, I was meeting the Lord Mayor of London. I met the King, His Majesty at Buckingham Palace, which was
nice flex there. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I'm gonna. I think that's a flex I'm allowed to make. That was very cool. That was a very, very cool moment. And all those things, like you want to feel like you are dressed to pay respect to the institution that you're in, and because these places and the institutions have several hundred years of history, if not more. So gotta wear a suit. So yes, I am now sort of, who's a guy on Twitter who talks about dressing a lot. right? Like, I need to kind of get him to go evaluate some of my suits because I have a few now. But that's been fun. Well, I'm not sure it's fun, but definitely been a change for sure. But okay. All right. Moving on from my attire. Okay. Movies and books of the year. Okay. Let's go through. It has been an interesting year for movies, I would say, in some ways.
Movies or books? Which one?
Let's pick movies. Okay. Interesting movies that stand out
what are
here.
your favorite movies? What are your most memorable movies of 2023?
I think there's some good ones and the bad ones. I think the good one, and it's sort of an obvious choice in many ways, has to be Oppenheimer. It just felt like a shared experience where everyone is watching it at the very, very same time. And we watched it on IMAX with the 70mm IMAX, which was kind of the optimum way. I made Aarthi wait for 2-3 weeks so we could actually watch it at the right format. She was not happy about it. And I would say there are so many things going on there. The fact that a half black and white, half color, 3-hour-long movie about a historical figure about the atomic bomb generated over $1 billion. The fact that it sparked off so many cultural conversations, whether it's a metaphor for AI, whether it is a metaphor for so many other things. And it was just cinema at its best. And it just makes you go like, okay, cinema is alive and well and thriving as a medium. That and Barbieheimer, the phenomenon, it being a pop culture moment, you just can't make that up. So I would say Oppenheimer, even if the movie hadn't been good, which it was, what sort of represented as a cultural moment has to be, I think, the standout of 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for both the movies. I mean, even for the Barbie movie, a lot of people went into it expecting it to be like really terrible. And we're all like kind of surprised and kind of went with it. And it's like, we watched it. And, the first 10 minutes and you're like, oh, okay, like this is not what I expected. Oppenheimer, huge expectations, especially for us in the tech world as such. There's like all these like parallels to, is this about AI really? Like, is this kind of the future? That kind of thing. So it sparked off a lot of conversations around it. We were interested in it because it's just, I think, Sriram, like you've read the Oppenheimer book and you've been wanting to watch this for a long time. And so I feel like it totally delivered, right? From just like what we thought it was going to be. The cinematography, storytelling, all the acting, like it was just very, very well done. Really nicely done movie at the end of it. So those two movies, Oppenheimer especially, I think are like the big, it's the summer of 2023 movies. I
have a question for you. Do you think Oppenheimer was actually about AI? Because I remember the whole narrative around then, but thinking back about now, I feel like maybe it wasn't about AI at all. Maybe it was just about Oppenheimer himself. I don't know. Like, did you ever get kind of a resolution on the topic?
I don't think it was meant to be this like, we're actually talking about AI even though we're talking about nuclear. I think it is really about, I will say it was about like some...
Is it, okay, let me ask you something. This is a future reference for later on the show. Is it EAC or is it D-cell?
It's D-cell, right? Like, I think it is really meant to showcase this like boogeyman, this techno boogeyman. It's like, something bad is going to happen and the whole world is going to end. We don't know what that is. You don't know what that is. We can't quantify it. There is no shape to it. It's not exactly AI, but it's like some mumbo jumbo new tech.
Yeah, I mean, wait, hold on. Just be clear. Okay, reducing the AI safety debate to mumbo jumbo was a bit much. But in this case, the mumbo jumbo was like, this could blow up the world, which was a much more real threat than AI.
No, I agree. I'm saying, was it like a wink wink to, AI is going to end the world? I don't think so. That was not what the movie was trying to do. But I do think the movie was D-cell in a way that it was trying to be, there are all these technologies that could be bad, who knows? And, one of them could like really wreck us. Like that was kind of the overarching kind of narrative. Like they didn't pick on like any one thing, but it was going to be like, who knows these things, tech bad kind of thing, which I take huge issues with. Like at the end of the day, it's math. Like, okay, fuck off. And you just can't be like, who knows what these are going to be? Well, tell us what that is. Like, what should we be afraid of when no one will?
Well, I would say the movie would say the thing we should be afraid of was what Matt Damon says, which is like, zero would be nice, right? Like, they're blowing up the world. Like, that's the line. Okay, but okay, let me ask you. So, we are officially saying Christopher Nolan, D-cell. You heard it here first. What are other movies that stood out to you this year? Or what are the themes about cinema that stood out to you this year?
Themes about cinema. The John Wick movie showed up, I think,
that was
the final
brilliant.
chapter.
That was brilliant.
It was good. Really want
Not the
them.
final
Yeah.
chapter, by the way. I think there are rumors, maybe confirmed or not, that they're
No
gonna-
way.
Oh yeah,
Really? Okay.
which is why I think so. I'm blanking on whether Keanu Reeves said this, but I'm pretty sure he did. But apparently, he wanted. Spoiler alert for those of you who have not seen John Wick 4, it's brilliant. But in the last sequence where he sort of lies down on the steps of Sacre-Cœur, if I remember, right? He's supposed to die.
Yeah.
They're supposed to show him actually die.
Yeah.
But in the movie, they kind of leave it a little hazy, right? Like they never like show him die. He just lies down. And it is because I think there was pressure to leave open the chance of a sequel. And I think I read somewhere, I could be wrong, about them actually think of making a sequel. But that movie was brilliant, right? Like if you folks haven't seen it, highly recommend watching it. The fight sequences, the visual style, there's so many diverse styles in the movie. The Tokyo sequence, the stairs up Sacre-Cœur, and then the contrast with the duel at the end. There is so many things which is you just peak poetry in cinema in so many ways. I think brilliant.
Yeah, really well. Can I say, Sriram, totally a different honorable mention movie, which you didn't put it in your list, but our daughter really likes it, and we have to mention it. It's the new Paw Patrol movie.
Yes.
Which has been which Sriram has been so surprised by. I don't know why he's so surprised by it, but he loves the plot of it. We watched it twice already.
Oh gosh,
just in the holidays.
Yes, I love this movie. So all right, so this is if you folks are parents, people are going to sit right up, and everyone's going, "What are we talking about?" Okay, so for those of you who are not parents, Paw Patrol is one of 2 or 3 incredibly popular franchises. If you have a kid under 6, 7, 8, you definitely know. The other is Bluey. There's a couple of others. And the basic premise is you basically have this kind of cast of superhero dogs, paws, spoiler, and they go save the day. Now, there is this animated show, which I think has several seasons. And I think every format of the show is kind of like this Saturday morning cartoon procedural. There is like usually a Gosh, I can't believe I'm spending so much time explaining this, but let's finish this. So there is usually like a pup going up a tree or gets lost. There's a chicken which gets lost every single time, and the pups have to go and rescue them. Right? And every pup has a thing. One of them is very good at water and fire, and they go do their thing, right? But the pups are under character development, and if you look at the show, it gets like you're like, okay, it's very much a pattern here. And if you're a parent, you're kind of watching this when your kid is watching it. And so the movie which just came out is a sequel, by the way, is 2 things. One is they expand the franchise in a different way, which has been explored in the TV show before, but the first time movies, which is they get superpowers, right? They get asteroid, they become superpowers, they become like the Avengers. But the thing is, it now has great character plot development, upgraded CGI. You can actually watch this. It's super fun. It's super fun to watch. So I really like the movie, and it's a hit with the kids. So huge thumbs up for the Paw Patrol, the Mighty Pups movie.
Yeah. Yes. What do you think of the Spider-Man movie, the Spider-Verse one?
Oh, again, brilliant. I think, so I'm going to try something else. So I would say one of the big themes of 2024 for cinema has been the slow spiraling and the obvious downfall of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? And there's so many things which, yes, right?
I never thought you would say that, Sriram.
Yes, and this is so hard for me to say, but like many others, I was obsessed with Marvel. I would watch every movie. The feeling when the flipbook animation plays at the beginning of a movie was just spectacular. And you were like, and I think some of my favorite cinema moments, whether it's I Am Iron Man to the Guardians of the Galaxy first movie to like Wakanda Forever to my favorite is the last sequence in Avengers Endgame. Like some of the best cinema I think ever created. They kind of figured out so many things, how to build this multi-movie franchise, how to do a superhero. Like before the first Avengers with Joss Whedon, nobody had figured out the superhero team-up movie. They did figure out all that. But I think for the first time, and this has been explored in multiple sort of media, I didn't feel like I wanted to go see movies. I didn't see Ant-Man and Quantumania. I haven't seen the Marvels. I think we actually saw Ant-Man and Quantumania on a flight. I haven't seen the Marvels yet. But there may be 1 or 2 others which I'm actually just missing and to lack of interest. And there are many factors. They obviously also been impacted by too much TV on Disney Plus, and obviously Jonathan Majors got getting convicted and his legal troubles, which has happened. So, but the TLDR is that Marvel is no longer must-watch content, and there has been a question about whether superheroes movies are a little bit like westerns from 1960s. So if you go back 1960s, 70s, you get this like huge series of westerns, which my dad was a huge fan of. And then they kind of died off because there was pressure. You told every story. And then in 1990, Unforgiven comes out, which is kind of seen as the capstone of Western movies. Like, oh, nobody, it's kind of like 20 years had gone by, and it's kind of like an era in the past of The Last Cowboy in some ways. And there's been this question about, are superhero movies done, right? Like, for example, last week, Aarthi, I don't really know this. Do you know that a sequel to Aquaman came out this week in theaters?
Sriram, I never know these things. I only know them because you inevitably drag me to the theaters, which I'm so glad you've stopped doing.
Yeah.
So Sriram's one of those people who, in our WhatsApp threads on like other like movie buffs or whatever, he's the one who's staunchly defending some really shitty Marvel movie, right? And it makes me feel so bad because I'm sitting there in this theater being like, why? Like, I have 2 hours. Why am I sitting here wasting this time? I could literally be doing anything else. I could be taking a nap. I could be doing anything else. And Sriram would be like, it wasn't so bad. It was okay. Like, sure, the ending could have been better, and it makes you feel so bad about it. But now I'm really glad that things have gotten so bad that even for Sriram's low bar, it is now even lower than that, where he's like, all right, you know what? I just cannannot defend this thing anymore.
Oh gosh! By the way, we had
I never know of these movies coming out because they're all so bad to me.
Yeah, this week, I think they kind of slid it out in a week when nobody wanted to watch it. Is the second Aquaman, which is the end of the DC extended universe, and people are like, please, just good riddance. Let's get rid of this. By the way, we had a great guest who talked about this, David Goyer, right? Like, and we also, I think we had actually a couple of guests who kind of talked about this in terms of like comic books and movies, and what has been happening with the cinematic universe. Like Mark Guggenheim of the Arrowverse was the other person who talked about it on our show. Yeah. And anyway, so this is a roundabout answer to your question on Spider-Man, which is it showed that you can still make freaking cool superhero movies, right? It was so fresh, right? It was a sequel to a very beloved first animated movie. And the sequels always have a huge challenge of like, you have to stay close to the spirit of the first movie if it's a hit, but you got to go different in so many ways. This movie did all of that. It was so creative with, all the different Spider-Man and expanding the character in so many ways. I think the only part I didn't love was it was a little bit of part 1 of 2. So you kind of have to watch the other movies, I think, coming out in a year or two because of the strike. Yeah. But, it showed you that you can make superhero movies which just feel fresh and cool and like unlike you see it, something you've never seen before. So I think it gave me hope that you can still watch superhero movies, right? Like that was kind of a very, very good feeling. So, all right, let's move on from movies. What about books? What was sort of your notable books of the year?
Notable books of 2023. I mean, honestly, I did such a poor job. Sure, you were much better at it. Initially, I wanted to be like, oh, well, I'll try and read like 1 book a week kind of thing. Fell way short of that, was just really bad at it. Same with just like, keeping in touch and all of that. Like, I just think like all my systems, everything got changed. So hopefully 2024 will be better. But there were a few books, for me at least, that stood out. Given that we are in this tech world and tech industry, it's a bit of a cliche, but I really did like the Elon Musk book.
Uh-huh.
I
lived parts of the Elon Musk book.
True, that's right. Yeah. It was inspiring for me. Like, you just, you look through everything that Elon Musk has done, all the companies he's founded, his like origin story, all of it, all the way to like where he is. And, it like pretty much catches up to like current day, right? And there is just so much. And so I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I'm not surprised that it's one of the most read books of the year. Or like, I think Amazon puts up a list. Waterstones, which is a bookstore in London, puts up a list. It tops like all of those book lists for a very good reason.
I actually
think that was good. What was?
That book was a bit hard for me to deal with because I think that I'm going to try to do something else I want to talk about, which is the Michael Lewis book. But that book, if you look at the Walter Isaacson book, it's there are 2 parts. There is the part which is, I would say, everything before the Twitter acquisition, where Walter looks at as the historian, right? He's like talking to all these sources, who's looking at papers, Elon's troubled childhood, a lot of that. And then there is a part of Twitter and X, which I think, one, obviously, personally, I played a little bit part of it. If you haven't heard of it, go Google me and you can sort of find more things. But then there is Walter's also in the room. And so I think for the very first time, he's playing the role of a journalist, not so much of a historian, or kind of an in-room observation. He's kind of seeing it live. I had a chat with Elon about this because I saw him recently, and I realized that he hadn't read the book at all, and he was asking me about it. And I realized that there were meetings and conversations where Walter and I on the same meeting, and his memory of the meeting is so different from mine, and not in a way that it's inaccurate or dishonest, but more about like my memory of what was important in that meeting, who are the key players, what was the key decision, what was actually going on in terms of the key technical or the business to be made, was very different from what Walter was observing. Maybe it's partly because he's kind of focused on the human drama and I was more focused on the business and the product side of things. But another element of it is like, I don't think, Walter has been in the room for many of these meetings where you're kind of making key technology platforms or product decisions. So he doesn't understand, like, when an engineer is making a presentation, like, this is actually what's happening. And this is the person he has to convince and what's going on. So that book is a bit hard for me. But I do think, obviously, it is an impactful book because Elon is such an impactful person. And I think it's a very, very impactful book. I'm going to say we had a lot of honorable mentions. There's going to be a dishonorable mention here. We already talked about things we hate on the show. But the book I really hated was Michael Lewis's Going Infinite. And I'm pretty sure, like, history...
Why did you hate that book?
Well, a few reasons. Number one, obviously, I would say the simplest way to think about it would be that Michael basically gives SPF a pass for a lot of the bad things which now have been thrown in a court of law. And in some ways, the whole book to me read like Lewis couldn't reconcile with himself the fact that he had been hoodwinked. And he couldn't accept it. So he had to find so many ways. I think there's an interesting sentence in the book where near the end, he says, like, SBF comes up with all these explanations for what has happened. And he says something like, and they've proven annoyingly hard to rebut. Not true. They've been very easy to rebut, right? Like, very, very easy, right? Like, a lot of people have done it on X. And, obviously had a jury which is kind of convicted him for some of these things. But, Lewis, I think, just couldn't bring himself to say that this person he was kind of fallen in love with in a way, who had kind of fooled him. And I think the whole book is a little bit, I think, of a defense case for Michael. And I would say, it was just very frustrating because SBF, in my opinion, caused so much damage to the crypto industry and, to technology. And a lot of people had been like financially impacted by it. And I think Michael Lewis had a front row seat. And he could have probably written something very, very different, but he chose not to. It also very interested me that he chose to come out with the book the week or the month before the SBF trial. It would be very interesting if the trial had happened, and then he'd be like, he's now convicted, what's going to happen? So, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people are very frustrated by it. That book was very, very frustrating before what it could have been and what it turned out. I do think the common element here between this and the Elon book is that both Lewis and Isaacson maybe are not the best documentarians, right? Like, they're not the best people to document what is happening in the room. They're maybe way better at telling stories after the fact. Or there's another element of this, which is maybe the more controversial one, which is like, hey, if Michael Lewis is so bad at this, right? What does the Gell-Mann's amnesia effect say, right?
Yes.
It says like, well, maybe he's bad at everything else too, and you just didn't know it because you're not so close to it.
No, that's exactly it. Like, to me, this is basically Gell-Mann amnesia, right? Like, you look at it as like, oh, well, this book was bad, and we know this because we are in the industry. You work in crypto. You're like very exposed to what the repercussions have been with SBF and, all the allegations, but also just like it affecting founders, the ecosystem, like everything else, right? You've seen this whole thing, you've lived through it. So that this book was just such a disservice to all of it. Like, just did the worst possible job and tried to just get away with it. To me, I look at it and go, this is probably true for all the past books of Michael Lewis, right? Like, why would you think that he's like, this is an exception, not the norm? And similarly for Walter Isaacson's too, right? I look at it and go, okay, but what about the Jobs book? But what about all these other books?
Oh gosh,
right?
yeah.
There are lots
of the Jobs book, so disappointing. Same thing. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, so maybe these are not the right people, to what you said, to like tell the story. And maybe we need to have like different folks who are actually understand what founders do and what builders do, and to be able to like tell the story, because I do think storytelling is important. As cliche as it sounds, some of you who I've met in person, you've all heard me say this: founders are the cohort of people that are going to change the world. Like, you want to encourage more people founding companies, And so storytelling is a really important part of that whole exercise, because you want to have role models, you want to have these stories, but you want to also pick the right storytellers. And I don't think these are the right people. And I think part of what Sriram and I do through this podcast and just us being out there, telling stories, is that, we are from this world, we are from this industry. And so we're doing a small part in just being this conduit with like having these right kind of like guests and having conversations here so that we can actually tell the story from the people themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, I think, and maybe we can just pick one because I think we have the same one. The tech event or the theme of the year. Okay.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Let's do that. And
what do you think, Sriram? What was it?
I'm going to combine a few. I think this has to be the year of, a lot of people are going to pick what happened at the OpenAI and all the drama surrounding it.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I
all
think
the drama.
But I think this is the year of the rise of AI discourse in the mainstream, the rise of regulation being a key battlefield for people who want to decelerate and accelerate. And I think it's a rise of what we might think of as a new religion in terms of EAC, which I think is going to be very interesting to see in future years. I think it's maybe the public reckoning of what has happened to the existing religion in effective altruism. And for us, I would say is there have been so many of these forces that have been mulling around, and if you're in all the group texts and chats and all these parties, which is EAC versus EA to all these whispers about what is happening in various regulatory back channels and back rooms, and it's all kind of came to a head in very, very public terms. Like, you would not believe the number of people where the whole OpenAI drama with Sam being fired and being brought back is happening. The number of people who would ask me, like, hey, what is this effective altruism thing, right? Like, explain this to me, right? I'd be like, pull up a chair and let's talk about it. So I think this was sort of this been bubbling up in so many ways, and it kind of all came out. So that is, I think, one theme. I think the other theme I'm going to pick is what does corporate governance actually mean? Because this year, with OpenAI, you have this question of who really has power, right? Is it a board? Is it a CEO? Is it the charter, which may or may not be visible? Is it the employees of the company? Is it the customers? Is it the lead investor? And I think you kind of saw this interesting power struggle, which honestly, we're going to see, what the ramifications are for other companies down the road. So I know this is not really so much about the technology, which had an amazing year, but I think so much of like things have been building up, bursting into the public battleground, and I think it's going to keep going on in 2024. That has to be a theme of the year.
Did you mean when you said, with the Sam Altman getting fired, getting reinstated, people were asking you about effective altruism or EAC?
Effective altruism, because one of the narratives was that a couple of the board members were kind of aligned with effective altruism, and I think and this is kind of true for not just OpenAI, but maybe some of the other companies also. And so a lot of people are like, hey, what is this? They'd be like, a lot of people, hey, what is the whole EA doomerism thing, right? I'm like, like here are 25 podcasts you should listen to, and 25 people you should listen to. And Mark came on an episode.
Yeah, got it. That makes sense. Okay, so for me, it's AI, it's OpenAI. That's like the big theme of the year. But also for me, I see it as a theme because of the number of thousands of companies that have been founded this year through that's built on or like is focused on AI. It feels like 10 years, 12 years ago, when was the iPhone launched, right? Like we were there through the whole thing. And, when the App Store opened up, you could see, a huge cohort of people being like, I'm going to write iOS apps, right? And it became a thing. It became this wave. And this is the first time since then I'm seeing that whole wave. Like I've seen friends like quit jobs, basically go all in, just starting companies, building things, because AI is such a movement, and people building like really fun, unique startups. And that is amazing to see. Like no matter what happens to the individual startup story itself, I think as a movement, as a wave, there is just this like energy and momentum that we haven't seen in the industry in a few years. And it's really awesome and exciting to go see that, to just get like thousands of companies getting founded to go build something there. So
Yeah.
and not just like on OpenAI, not just not just like a specific platform, but just full stack problems, being able to go solve for like different kind of use cases. It's just amazing to go see.
Yeah, I think the thing with AI is obviously there's been a lot been said about how it's maybe one of the more transformative technologies you might see. But you're kind of seeing some of the patterns that happened with previous technology ways, which is regulatory capture, the press narratives, all happening in such a more compressed time frame. If you think about, say, the mobile era from the launch of the iPhone to maybe the key apps like Uber or Twitter happening, that kind of took like 5-6 years, maybe longer. And with AI, with say ChatGPT, I think launched maybe around this time last year, right? Been maybe a year. From then, you've seen GPT-4, you've seen open source AI, you've seen likes of Mistral, you've seen other companies like Perplexity built on top, you've seen all the generative AI stuff with Midjourney, and all these things have been happening, and it's happened in such a small period of time. And that is only the technology side and product side, and the fundraising side. There has been the regulatory conversations. The UK had the AI Safety Summit. There's been the Biden executive order. So many other things which which you're missing. So I think you're speed running a technology trend, and that is not going to stop in 2024. And that's going to be very, very interesting to see. I think it's going to impact crypto as well. I think the intersection of crypto and AI is going to be very, very interesting. You're starting to see crypto prices really tick up, and that's going to be interesting as well. So yeah, I think 2024 is going to be very, very interesting. But I think the rise of EAC, all the narrative and AI has to be maybe the story of 2023. Okay, one final question, I think maybe, which is sort of like, when you sort of look back upon 2023, what do you kind of see as big life changes that has kind of like worked out for you, habits that have worked out for you, and then also looking forward to 2024, what are you kind of like most looking forward to?
I mean, I think we talked about books, but one book I forgot to mention that's had like a pretty deep impact was Peter Attia's Outlive. Mm-hmm. And, if you're in the world of like listening to a lot of the top podcasts, you probably have listened to Peter Attia. He has this like really great podcast. Him, Andrew Huberman, these are like the big folks that cover health, wellness, fitness, all topics around it, but in like a very scientific, rigorous way. And, Peter Attia is somebody I followed for a few years, listened to all of his content. And so the book itself was not a huge surprise because it felt like a packaging of like a lot of his like podcast content and just content that he puts out there. But it kind of like all of it, reading it together, kind of, it sounds kind of dumb, but it made me kind of take my own health seriously. Over the last 5-ish years for me, health-wise, like I started out as a young adult being an athlete, really focused on health, being focused on fitness. I was one of those people who knew what VO2 max was and was measuring it like way back in the day, right? Like I was like really into it. And then for the last 5-6 years or so, I kind of like got off that treadmill. Lots of stuff in the pandemic, kids, everything. And it was kind of good to like reset. I think the move also helped a bit to kind of figure out, okay, you have to make time for it. And I think Attia talks this as like not so much lifespan, but as health span. It's about like what kind of quality of life do you aspire to have, like right now, but also the last few years of your life, how do you want it to be? Do you want to be bedridden, alive, consuming a lot of pills and just like not healthy? Or do you want the last few years of the last decade of your life to be like really healthy, joyous, being able to be independent, that kind of thing? And you really kind of start taking yourself seriously, kind of working backwards from there. So to me, that kind of had like a really big impact. I highly recommend the book. I recommend, Attia's content, all of it. And it helped me just in the last 4 or 5 months, just reset and take health more seriously and actively train. So I now like lift a lot, do a lot of weightlifting, do a bunch of like, I've always been a runner, but now I'm just more focused on like specific goals on running than just like go out and just run kind of thing. We also got to know some people in the fitness world like Robin Arzon, who kind of have this down to a T, right? Like her system is so inspiring, and not just for Peloton, but she's like a runner. She's written books on running, and just like a really good inspiration person to look up to. So just having these people in our sphere and reading books has helped me a lot to like shape and develop my thinking on how to think about fitness and wellness and just overall health and stress management and all of that.
Which I think maybe I was glad you didn't mention, because I wanted to mention this person. I think the person who I think is really shifted my opinion on this, outside of Huberman and Robin and a lot of these folks you mentioned, is Brian Johnson, aka the Live, Don't Die guy. Now, Brian, I think, is really interesting. He's going to be the guest on the show pretty soon. I actually want to go back because I think there's a book which Brian recommends, which I highly recommend people here read. It's called Zero, the Biography of a Dangerous Idea. And it is the book about the invention of the concept of zero in mathematics. The book does a great job, but basically, if you haven't thought of zero, feels blasphemous, and sometimes it was blasphemous literally, to have a concept of nothing, right? And it talked about like how, the idea of nothing as a mathematical construct took centuries to evolve, and kind of this political and religious fights over it. But it kind of gives you the idea of like the sense of first principles being a thing of like, okay, let's deconstruct things to the simplest thing. But I think the zero, the book tells you like sometimes maybe there is this other idea which makes you want to question the fundamental platform on, for everything and maybe there's something else out there, which is what the number zero seemed like to a lot of our ancestors. And Brian Johnson talks about it in terms of his personal journey and in terms of how, he thought about, okay, I can basically go on this life and I can be a little healthier, or I can try and reverse aging, right? His tagline is "Don't die," which is a little bit facetious, but also kind of have a spirit, which is like, seems so crazy. And I think he is so interesting because he's not for everybody. I'm sure people are going to think he's crazy or out there, and he's like a rich tech person who's spoiled and he looks weird. But for me, I think he's out there, pushing the frontier forward and sharing it with a lot of people. And he's very clear that you can kind of pick whatever works for you. And I'm just happy that he exists, right? And whether you like him or hate him, you can't ignore him, right? Like, he invites conversation. And so some of the things that he's talked about, I try to incorporate. But I think his philosophy and how he's going to approach, building content, building a moment, and kind of like taking an idea has been super interesting. So that's, I think, that's been kind of more recently, I would say, the last few months have been a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know we've been talking about Brian Johnson a lot, not just from like fitness, health standpoint, but also just being a good content creator for this last year.
Yes.
And just consistently putting out good, high quality, inspiring content out there. And, as facetious as Don't Die sounds, it's like, it's the spirit of it, right? It's like to want to be able to take yourself, your own health seriously. I think we all kind of like reach that point in life where we're like, yeah, like, if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. You just have to like pick it up and think about it. So I think we are kind of there right now.
Yeah. And I think, we're kind of running out of time. I would say we'll probably go to a different episode later on 2024 and our plans and productivity and some of our plans. But we have a lot of things planned for 2024. The show, how we want to, we're going to expand in many different ways. It's not going to be just a show. It's going to be many things. And, I mean this, like, it's the end of the year. And I just want to say thank you so much for everybody who's kind of been a big part of this journey, continue to be a part of this journey, whether you've been with us since the early Clubhouse days or before, or whether this is the first episode. We really appreciate it. As you can tell, we could not do it without you, but this has been so much fun, and there's going to be a lot more in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. We will do probably another episode in 2024, just projects we're working on, things like that. I think it'll be fun. But this year was so fun for us. It's just great to sit behind in front of this camera and just record, put out content, and just see the reaction, see the comments come through. So don't stop. Keep sending us feedback. And we are looking forward to showing up at least once a week and putting in an episode every week there and just keeping consistent at it. I will make sure that happens, whether the artist in this room likes it or not.
We'll see if the inspiration grabs me, right? Like, we will see. But no, it's been great. And wherever you are, hope you had an amazing year. Hope you kind of like, curled up somewhere warm or cold or whatever your choice is. And hope you have a wonderful 2024. But
New Year.
Happy New Year. See you next time. Bye.
All right. See you, folks.